Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. Thank you all for joining our conversation today. Today is going to be another quick, short one because we really wanted to talk about this particular topic in preparation to next week's episode with KayLee Dunn. I want to say the KayLee Dunn. I don't know how many people know who KayLee Dunn is, but go look her up, especially on TikTok. Alana and I have been following her for a while now, and I'm so excited to have her on. We will interview her next week. So, we're talking today about emotional detachment because next week with KayLee, we're going to be talking about the central nervous system. And I think this is a really great intro, Alana, to help them maybe get more in tune and slow things down a little bit more to prepare for what they're going to hear from KayLee about the central nervous system.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because as we were preparing for this and looking at emotional detachment, where my brain went was like, oh, a lot of times women will have to emotionally detach from their spouse when they are in addict behaviors or when they're actively acting out for their own emotional safety. So when I heard emotional detachment, that's kind of where my brain went first.
Mm,
And then recognizing hold up. It's really common after trauma to emotionally detach from ourselves. And there's a term of disassociation. And like, yes, levels of disassociation or high levels of disassociation can come with trauma, but this detaching from our emotions and from our experience. I had pulled open a workbook that I use for my teens. It's called the Sexual Trauma Workbook for Teen Girls, and they had a section on overcoming emotional detachment. And they give this little like precursor to it. I'm just going to read it. It says, do you ever feel like you're watching someone else's life unfold before your eyes, only it's really yours? When you experience a traumatic event, it's hard to be in touch with your feelings, let alone express how you feel to others. In an effort to protect yourself, you may pull away from your feelings and relationships and become emotionally detached and numb. And I really like that that is how they started it because I even think about when everything first happened, I kept having the thought of this can't be my life. This can't be my life. This can't be happening. Or when I went to a group for the first time or a therapist for the first time and hearing myself talk, it was like, this is not happening. This is not my life. Or picturing myself sitting in this group and picturing myself sitting in this disassociating
right.
because everything was so big and so intense. As a way to self-protect, I had to pull back
Yeah.
so I could survive.
Oh my gosh, yes. And you know what? Like going back to what you said, how you originally kind of were identifying emotional detachment, like with a partner. I think both exist oftentimes where if you feel like you have to detach from your partner because of their acting out behavior, you have emotions around that. And I'll just speak for myself. When that would happen, I would take those emotions and shove them so to avoid them in order to stay functioning in that relationship in the house with kids. So there's still this level of really whatever emotion we're feeling in our body, whatever is showing up, that detachment is the avoid resist. We're numbing out, we're ignoring, we're shoving down and discounting, dismissing. There's so many different ways that we do this, making, you know what, it doesn't matter. You know what? I'll take the high road this time. You know what? I'll give him a hard pass. Maybe he doesn't understand. Maybe he just is slower and I just need to explain it differently. Whatever that shows up for you, it's still this idea of we're detaching from our emotions and putting them on the back burner and making whatever else is there first.
That big sigh, I don't know if it picked up. I don't know if Zoom picked up on the big sigh, but the big sigh is my, "Oh, shit." Mm, like, I I have always said, like, I am the queen of suppression. I can suppress my emotions like nobody's business, and I'll tell you, it actually works really well as a therapist because when I need to be fully present with my client, no matter what's happening in my life, it's like, "Okay, we can set this aside and I'm here and I'm with you in this. And I look at this and I can look at what I've gone through with my husband and how I went through this very intense period of emotional detachment. But if I'm really honest and real with myself, I have had a pattern of that through my whole life. And I can look at my childhood where there was big, big, intense feelings in my house that I learned not only by watching others in my house, but I learned for my safety and survival. I needed to learn how to emotionally detach. And so there's going to be certain times in the journey as you're doing your work where you're going to see where your recovery work today is so intertwined with stuff from your childhood and your past. And I just want to make space for that because as we start to dive into like how we can recognize the emotional detachment, how we can start stepping out of it, things we can do to bring ourselves more online again. I just want to highlight that for some of you, this might have been a pattern that's amplified right now as you're healing, but could have been a pattern through a lot of your life. And it's interesting because some clients will come in and they will sit there and they will talk about everything they've gone through, and it is horrific, all of the trauma and pain. Yet they sit there
No
with
emotion.
no emotion, almost no facial expressions. Sometimes certain pieces will trigger a little bit, and then I literally can watch them shove it down and keep going.
Yep, those parts, those protector parts are amazing. Because
Yeah.
to your point, that's how they've survived.
Will you talk more about that? Because I think I want to take a little bit of the shame away from this emotionally detaching from ourselves. That if you're
Yeah, good
listening
idea.
to this and you're going, relating at all to what I'm talking about, I don't want you sitting there in shame going, oh my gosh, I can't, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, it is so, like, definitely let shame part just sit over in the corner because this is where I'm just gonna invite that self-compassion and that grace and understand y you, who you are not you're not your body, your emotions, your brain, or your experiences and how you've been impacted, and it's what you've experienced as a human, but you have parts, protect your parts, parts that know about how horrific those experiences have been in your life. They know about what that is, and they don't ever want that to happen again, and so they do a really good job. And like you said, if you've grown up, you can't feel, certainly can't feel big, whatever that messaging was, whether it's childhood or an abusive relationship, just trauma in general, where you get a message, those parts go to work on protecting you. And so I think just recognizing that and being okay. This is that awareness with acceptance, being aware of the parts, being aware of yourself that, yep, I'm not showing any emotion and I'm not going to, and I don't want to. That's okay. Let's just see more why and let's accept and not make yourself wrong for it. Okay, this is going to sound like a tangent, but it's not. Just this morning, Scott woke up feeling the emotion of insecure. And he wanted me to coach him through this a little bit because he had a big meeting today. And bottom line, I'm going to skip all of the details. But bottom line, what it came down to is he's like, you know what? He works for a big corporate company. And so there's all that corporate stuff. And he goes, well, it's just when all of these other colleagues are together and they're puffing up their shoulders and talking about how great they are and really working the ladder and working the networking stuff. Like, I don't like that. That's not me. I don't need that. And they're talking about just even things that don't really interest me about the corporate world or business. Like, I just want to do my job, go home to my, wife and kids. And so he's saying that he feels really insecure about this. And I'm like, but what if that's okay? What if you can like own the insecurity of not fitting in to an environment that sounds like you don't, want to? And there's that little shift where all of a sudden that insecure part of him that he thought was wrong and dangerous and why are you here? Need to go away. Just that little shift of thank you. Thank you for letting me know that I actually don't feel comfortable in those situations and I don't want to. So, of course, I'm going to be insecure. I don't like that. So, just that example came to my mind that happened just this morning of slowing it down and being aware and then just asking those questions. And really, the key part for Scott was, but what if that's not a bad part? And if you haven't read the book, No Bad Parts, read it. But what if that insecure part isn't bad or wrong? And I think sometimes we think it's all wrong.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, there's no bad parts, meaning every part that shows up is there to help you. And it's funny that you went to Scott because as you were talking, I was thinking about how this applies so much to all of the men we work with as well. And whether you are betrayed or the betrayer, we still have this detachment from ourselves that can happen, and how essential it is that we start connecting with ourselves again. And
Absolutely.
Brene Brown, she talks about how with feelings, you can't numb just one. And man, oh man, oh man, I wish I could, because what I want to do is I want to be like, I don't like feeling anxious, numb that. I don't want to feel depressed. Let's numb that. I don't want to feel angry. Let's numb that. Oh, but I still want joy and I still want happiness and I want to be silly and I want to have fun and I want to feel connection and love. And but the truth is when we numb one, it numbs them all. And so it's really important that we start practicing getting in touch with our feelings again,
Mhm,
which is therapy 101 for anything that you go into therapy for,
mhm.
going to be getting back. That's why you hear or watch on the movies the therapist of going like, well, how do you feel? How does it make you feel? Now, a good therapist, you may hear that from time to time. That's not all therapy is, but that is therapy 101, is really getting in touch with those feelings. And
Awareness and validate your own emotions.
yeah,
Being aware and then validating your own emotions. Gotta start there.
well, and even like this question of, if we think about right now as you're going through this trauma, are there any feelings you felt in the past that you miss today? And like, if do you miss happiness? Do you miss joy? A lot of times I'll see people who, when they start really practicing feeling and opening up again, the first time they feel happiness, it feels wrong. And they actually shut that down. Wait, 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 I can't feel happy. All this stuff is happening right now. I can't feel happiness. But as you recognize what feelings you're not feeling right now, that can be something to just start help you have some awareness that there is some detachment going. And again, if we're numbing one, we might, we will be numbing them all.
Yeah, for sure. So something just came to my mind as I'm thinking about the central nervous system. And I'd love to know more of your thoughts on this, Alana. When I think about the trauma response, fight, flight, and then freeze, and the emotions or lack of, if we're in freeze, emotions that come with the trauma responses, that is different than what we're talking about, I think. At least I want to make sure we're talking about it differently in that when we have a trauma response, your body is going to flood with something and you have to consciously choose to slow that flood, that pag down, the paradoxal gray, and then go into the body. This is all that higher self-conscious choice stuff. And I think anytime you have an emotion that is related to a trauma response, I think this is why it's so important not to judge yourself and not to shame yourself and not to think that you like brought it on. I know that as a coach, I do a lot of like your thoughts create your emotions, right? But when we have an actual response to a trigger, to danger, the way that we approach that is a little bit different steps in there than what we're talking about here in the emotional detachment.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about it in this way, but yes. Because one, you're talking about instinctive responses or the
Correct.
instinctive defenses, and naturally
Yeah.
feeling come up with that. And they do, they flood your body and overwhelm your system. And in essence, our logical brain is going offline. Fight, flight, freeze kicks in because there's perceived danger and we have to be able to act very quickly. And so it's all about survival. And so, again, if logical brain is offline, the wise mind is a combination of being able to access the logic and access the emotion and then be able to make decisions through the wise mind. And
Yes.
so, yes, as we're talking about this and bringing the emotions back online, we first have to do our work around the fight, flight, and freeze and learn how to come back into our window of tolerance of what we can handle, not necessarily what we like, but what we can handle. And then in that window of tolerance, we want to start exploring using this wise mind with logic and emotion and then start exploring what's coming up for us. What are we feeling? What are we noticing? Allowing our body to feel it. And I know in the past we've done episodes on like how to feel feelings, and I don't remember what they're called, but if you scroll on whatever listening platform you hear us on,
We really should have numbered them. If I could go back 3 years ago, I would have started numbering so we could say go to episode whatever, and I have 0 desire to go back and number all of them, so sorry, y'all.
oh, no, because here's the thing is technically we have people who work for us who we could have read that. But then that requires me and you to go back and know what episodes are where.
Well, that's true too, but still, it would be a little bit easier. No, because then they could go in the show notes and put it in for us because we don't write our show notes.
Well, and actually, if we had them on a Google Doc, we could hit control find.
Ah,
Topics. Okay, well, maybe we will do that one day.
maybe
Yeah,
one day, but anyways, until then, start scrolling.
it is. But there's episodes out there on just how do I feel feelings. And I think that right here is a good one just to look at and explore. But I want you to first, before you do that, just recognize where and how detachment is showing up for you. And so, even thinking about like the questions of like, which emotions do I try to avoid
Mhm.
or resist? Which
Or
emotion,
feel like I shouldn't feel, like
huh?
anger.
Or even which emotions do I have a hard time identifying with? There's an app that I will recommend to my clients called How We Feel.
Hmm,
And the little icon on the app is a little heart, with multiple colors. But when you go in, you do daily emotional check ins. And it has in there, you can click on an emotion and it tells you what the emotion is and gives you a definition of it. So I love it because it helps you recognize. But that is something that you can go look at a feelings wheel or get the app How We Feel, look through the emotions and see which ones you have not felt in a really long time. See which ones maybe you've never felt. See which ones that you're struggling to feel. Whichever ones that you're avoiding, resisting, or don't give yourself permission to, that's a great place to start. And recognize which ones you're living in and which ones might be blocking. So, this episode, I think more than any, is just a hey, we're going to give you a little something to think about, sit with, do some journaling on, and it will get us prepared for next week, diving deeper with KayLee. And you'll love KayLee 'cause she's super real, which those are my people.
exactly.
Okay. And do you want to add any final thoughts? Okay. Well, thanks for hanging out with us this week. Um,
No, you always say, "As always, thanks for"
you.
Yes.
Oh, well, as always, thanks for hanging out with us this week. I didn't even know I do that. Thanks for hanging out with us. Good luck on your journaling. Go journal this, do your work with it. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Head over to the show notes to see what we've got going on. We have some new groups to offer to help support you in your healing journey. Or you can go to chooserecoveryservices.com and check out those resources. We have a lot of new groups supporting the betrayed partner and groups supporting the addict and groups supporting the marriage. And if you are headed towards should I stay or should I go? Or you know that, you know what? I'm heading towards divorce. There are also support for you there as well. So head on over and find what will help you to choose recovery, to choose healing, and to choose you. Take care, everybody.